Let's get to the story of the day. Story number 1. The first thing I remember about my near-death experience is that I discovered myself in a realm of total darkness. I was in no bodily discomfort. I was still aware of my existence as George, and all around me was blackness, total and utter darkness, the greatest darkness ever, darker than any dark and blacker than any black. This was what was all around me and pressing down on me. I was shocked. I was completely unprepared for this. I was surprised to discover that I still lived, but I had no idea where I was. How can I be when I'm not, was the one idea that kept running through my head. That was what bothered me. I gradually regained control of myself and began to consider what had occurred and what was happening. However, nothing refreshing or soothing came to mind. Why am I in this gloom? What should I do? I think, therefore I am, Descartes famously said. And that lifted a big weight off my shoulders because I knew I was still alive, albeit in a completely different dimension. If I am, why shouldn't I be positive? I reasoned. That's what occurred to me. I'm George and I'm in the dark, but I know it. What I am is what I am. I can't be negative. How can I define what is positive in the darkness? I wondered. Positive is similar to bright. Then I was in light. Bright, white, dazzling, and powerful. A very bright light. It was bright, but not wavering, like a camera flash. Constant illumination. The brightness of the light was initially distressing for me. I couldn't look at it directly, but gradually I began to feel safe and warm, and everything seemed to come back to normal. Then I noticed all these molecules floating around. Atoms, protons, neutrons, just flying around everywhere. On the one hand, it was completely chaotic, yet what made me so happy was that this disorder also had its own symmetry. This symmetry was stunning, cohesive and complete, and it filled me with excitement. I saw before my eyes the global forms of life and nature. Any concern I had about my body vanished at this point, because it was evident to me that I didn't need it anymore, that it was actually a hindrance. Everything in this experience melted together, making it difficult to arrange events in chronological sequence. Time as I know it came to a halt, for me. The past, present, and future were somehow fused together in the timeless unity of life. At some point, I went through what has been referred to as the life review process, in which I saw my life from beginning to conclusion all at once. I took my part in life's real-world dramas, almost like a holographic vision of my life, playing out in front of me with no sense of past, present, or future, just now and the reality of my life. It wasn't like it started with my birth and progressed to my life at the University of Moscow. Everything appeared at once. I was there. This was my existence. I didn't feel any sense of regret or sorrow for what I had done. I had no strong feelings regarding my failures, flaws, or accomplishments. All I could think of was my current situation, and I was happy with it. I had accepted my life as it was. During this period, the light simply gave me a sense of calm and contentment. It was really encouraging. I was overjoyed to be in the light, and I realized what the light signified. I discovered that all of the physical rules in human life paled in comparison to this universal reality. I also realized that a black hole is only another aspect of the infinite that is light. I realized that reality is all around me. This is eternal life, not just earthly existence. So I felt whole with the light, as if everything was fine with me and the universe. So there I was, filled with all of these great thoughts and experiences, when someone began to cut into my stomach. Could you imagine? What had happened was that I had been transported to the mortuary. I was declared dead and abandoned for 3 days. An investigation into the reason of my death was launched, and an autopsy was performed on me. As they started cutting into my stomach, I felt as if a giant power grabbed my neck and pushed me down. And it was so strong that as I opened my eyes, I was overcome with pain. My body was cold, and I started shivering. They immediately stopped the autopsy and brought me into the hospital, where I stayed for the next 9 months, the majority of which I was on respirator. I gradually recovered my health, but I'd never be the same again because all I wanted to do with the rest of my life was study wisdom. This new passion led me to the University of Georgia, where I earned my second PhD in religious psychology. Then I was ordained as a priest in the Eastern Orthodox Church. We eventually moved to America in 1989, and I'm now an associate pastor at the First United Methodist Church in Nederland, Texas. Anyone who has had such an encounter with God, who has felt such a profound sense of connection with reality, understands that there's only one truly meaningful work to be done in life, and that is to love. To love nature, to love people, to love animals, to love creation itself, simply because it is. The only meaningful existence is to serve God's creation with a warm and loving hand of generosity and compassion. Many individuals seek answers from those who have experienced near-death experiences because they believe we have them. But I know this is not totally accurate. None of us will fully comprehend life's profound truths until we eventually connect with eternity at death. Meanwhile, it is human nature to seek answers to our deepest questions concerning the near-death experience and immortality. Story number 2. My first near-death experience occurred in 1995 when I was 45 years old. I had a huge heart attack and had to have a triple bypass. When I awoke from the anesthesia, I had a distinct recall of being transported to another world or location, if you will. For several months, I thought the medications were to blame for this recollection, but after some time, I realized it was something else. I glided or floated to an unfathomable level of tranquility. The sky was as blue as I'd ever seen it. When I look at a blue sky today, I feel at ease. Tall grass blew gently in the breeze over sweeping hills. However, there was no sense of a breeze, nor was there any sound. It was quite silent. I wasn't walking, but rather floating leisurely across the fields. This location exuded warmth, calm, and an inexplicable sense of fulfillment and oneness with the universe. I saw frames of my children flashing across the horizon as I slowly drifted over the hills, enjoying this sensation of extreme warmth. They weren't still pictures, but rather images of them looking at me, concerned. They wanted me to return to be with them. They needed me, but they said nothing. I could hear them even if I couldn't see their mouths move. I realized I had to make a decision right then and there. I wouldn't be returning if I didn't. To continue, I would be surrounded by this peace and warmth indefinitely. It would have been lovely to have continued. Going back would take me to a realm of hurt and pain. It would be fraught with anguish and responsibility. Emotional anguish, life's pressures. I returned because my children needed additional guidance in planning their futures. Their future depends on my presence. It was just not the right time. The children were simply not prepared to proceed on their own. I was back in an instant. In 1997, I had my second near-death experience. I was in a catastrophic car accident that resulted in numerous significant injuries. I felt no pain while stuck in the automobile, despite having my pelvis broken in 2 places, a fractured tailbone, a rib that had penetrated my lung, a cracked skull, lacerations to my face, and a portion of my ear removed. For months following the accident, I had many flashbacks, but I had a complete and happy memory of the near-death experience when I became cognizant enough to communicate and stay awake without passing out several days later. I began discussing my experience with my son first, then with others as I got more comfortable doing so. Again, I tried to determine whether this was due to the medicines or simply the messages your mind conceives when your body shuts down. I witnessed a place of warmth, love, camaraderie once more. It looked like a tunnel, but it wasn't spherical. It was more like a walkway-type tunnel that connects buildings or stores, the kind that spans a wide rather than a narrow street. I walked down it, or so it felt, but I don't remember my feet moving. It wasn't particularly bright on either side of the path, but it wasn't particularly black either. I could see people when I got to the end of the tunnel. It looked like it was only from their waists up. It was not at all frightening. Everyone was cheerful and smiling. I recognized some of the people. I saw two grandfathers as well as my father. It was quite dark behind their bodies, and I could feel the presence of many others. Someone was greeting me by shaking my hand. I believe it was my father. He died of Alzheimer's disease and was in a state of disarray when he died. But now that he was standing up and appearing healthy, I saw how short he truly was. Everyone was overjoyed to see me. At that time, I felt compelled to return to the living. It wasn't a terrifying sensation, but rather a point at which a decision had to be made. I still don't believe the decision to return was mine. I had the impression that it was determined for me. My hand was still clutching, though no longer shaking in greeting, the person with whom I had first started shaking hands. The hand felt comforting and warm. As I floated backwards toward the living world, my hand slowly and softly fell away. The hand wasn't gripping me tightly, but it was a really delicate grip. It was then over. I'd come back. I recall seeing a brown door with an old-fashioned porcelain doorknob on it, surrounded by a black background somewhere during this entire experience, or whatever it was. I realized there was a religious phenomena, a really bright light, and most likely God himself on the other side of the door. This entrance is constantly open and accessible to anyone. I can go through it whenever I want. I had a feeling my hand was on the doorknob and I could have walked in at any point. In reflection, I am no longer terrified of death. I have a strong feeling that there are people who crossed over to the other side against their will, and I pity them. They are content there because they have acclimated, but they would have preferred to spend more time in the real world with loved ones.